for a very long time. And really the only connection that I found for this plant with Christmas is just that it is shaped like a pine tree. It's a little bit anticlimactic, but it was also interesting to learn more about the Norfolk Island and its history. And if you like the look of a large tree in your home or a living Christmas tree, I think the Norfolk Island pine would be a wonderful selection. The next plant on our list of iconic holiday and Christmas plants is the Euphorbia pulcherrima, also known as the poinsettia. The poinsettia is endemic to Mexico and Central America, and it does have close ties to indigenous cultures in Mexico, primarily the Aztecs, where it was used for medicinal purposes and also in cloth dyeing. The poinsettia is the most iconic holiday plant, in my opinion. I mean, really, you see them and you instantly think Christmas, and that is largely due to one family's influence, because prior to that, it was just a really beautiful plant, obviously used in the Aztec culture for daily life. So this plant, much like other euphorbia, has bracts, and so the colorful leaves that you see, the red, the purple, not purple, the red, the white, the pink, the variegated pieces, those are called bracts, and they are just decorative or protective leaves for the actual flower, which is the yellow piece in the center. There are lots of euphorbia that have bracts, but also some other plants that you might not know. Artichokes, the parts that you eat, are called bracts. Bougainvillea, the very beautiful, vibrant purple plants I saw them a lot in Tucson, but also they're all over Italy. And peace lilies also have a bract. The white spathe is also a bract, and the centerpiece of the peace lily flower is the actual flower. So in Aztec culture, the poinsettia was a symbol of renewal, life and death, purity, and it was used as such in medicines to help reduce fevers. It was also used to help with skin conditions, and they would use a lot of the time the milky sap inside of the plant, which we now know is much more on the toxic side. Like much of euphorbia, like the sap and all of that kind of stuff, we now know from our research that it's not always safe to use, but it's really interesting that they used it probably for a very long time in their medicines, in their skin balm, in their skincare routines. Probably had great results. I mean, obviously I wasn't there, but it's interesting to hear that something that we now know as being unsafe or possibly a skin irritant was used either to ingest or put on skin to help with skin irritation. There's also small fragments of information that supported that it was also used as a lactation aid, so for breastfeeding and things like that, which I think is very, very interesting. But also another really common use of the poinsettia was using the bracts to dye clothing, and they would just boil the leaves and crush them up and then use that as their clothing dye, which is really interesting. It was definitely used, in textiles for the wealthy and for the warriors, but also if you were in a lower class, more diluted versions of the poinsettia dyed clothing was definitely circulating. Now, how this plant actually came through to the States was through Joel Poinsett, who was the first US minister to Mexico, and he, in part of his duties, he was just hanging out and he saw a poinsettia, thought it was great, took a cutting and brought it back to his greenhouse in South Carolina, propagated it, and ended up sharing it with his friends. The plant was later named poinsettia in English by Johann Friedrich Kloch, who was a German botanist in honor of Joel Poinsett. This plant, though it is very popularized in the United States for Christmas, still holds great significance in Mexico, especially due to its connection to indigenous cultures there, and is referred to by its name, Quetzalcoatl. Sorry if I'm saying that incorrectly. I tried so hard to find a video that would help me. So as far as this plant being popularized in the United States and being largely marketed as a Christmas plant, this really didn't start until the 1920s when a man named Paul Eck, senior, I guess, because there is a junior who was involved here, but he had a small farm in Hollywood and he started to grow poinsettias. This family was also responsible for creating the more bushy looking plant that we know now. Poinsettias are actually a little bit more of a lanky plant. They don't grow naturally very bushy, and they're also responsible for the modifications that included all of the different colors, the variegations, all of that kind of stuff. And interestingly enough, it's estimated that over 70% of the poinsettias sold in the United States and 50% of the poinsettias sold overseas worldwide can trace their lineage back to the breeding program with the Eck family. Somebody told me a long time ago to look into the history of the poinsettias, and I had no idea that it was going to be so deep, and this is really what made me want to go on this deep dive about these plants and where they come from and what significance they have. And this is the one that had the most information specifically around Indigenous cultures. So I think it's really, really interesting that, I don't know, something that is and was so sacred to this ancient population is now just like on our kitchen tables for Christmas. I don't know. You don't often think that colonialism is going to touch plants, but it does. And there's a lot of plants out there that were more or less colonized. And yeah, I don't know how to feel about it, but it's very interesting nonetheless to learn about. And the last plant in our little mini series about holiday plants, iconic holiday plants, is the Schlumbergera. So fun to say, also known as the Christmas cactus. This plant is endemic to the tropical rainforests of Brazil, more so like the mountainous areas. And based on a lot of research, and if anybody knows something different, please let me know in the comments. I didn't see that it had any significance to the indigenous cultures of Brazil other than it just being a beautiful ornamental plant that happened to bloom around December, Christmas time. Obviously it wasn't Christmas for them, it's Christmas for us. When the temperatures drop a little bit and also it's darker for longer, that does trigger them to bloom. So fun fact, you can trick them into blooming any time of year as long as you can manipulate the amount of light they're getting. I personally think that this has a lot of cultural significance modern day. So while it didn't then, it really does now, because a lot of people can think back to their grandma's house and remember a massive Christmas cactus, and maybe you have parts of that plant. Maybe grandma shared pieces of that plant with you. Maybe now you have a big one, or maybe when somebody passes away, everybody's looking at that plant thinking, well, this has been in the family for like 50 years. So we got to figure out what to do with this thing. It holds very, very significant value to family tradition, especially as far as plants are concerned, because they are just such long living plants. Sometimes they can outlive their owners. This plant was first described by the French botanist Charles Lemaire in 1852, and it was named after the German-born French botanist and horticulturist, and was later described by the German-French botanist Frederick Schlumberger. This is one of those plants, among so many others, that was brought to Europe during the Victorian era when ornamental indoor houseplants were very, very popular, probably in a very beautiful Wardian case. And they were later on selectively bred to have all of these wonderful colors. Sometimes they're pink, purple, white. So you guys, that is the story of these 3 iconic houseplants that have become staples of Christmas traditions in our homes. I'm so happy to have shared this information with you. If you have anything to add, any corrections, any additional information, any sidestep conversation, if there are any plants that have holiday significance in your family that I didn't mention here, I would love to hear about them and their stories down below. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful holiday season, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!